listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome into a fresh episode of the GM Shuffle. I'm Grace Remington with Michael Lombardi. We are ready. We are so excited to recap Week 1 NFL action. But Michael, first I have to ask you, because you sent your setup to the group chat this weekend. You got the quad box going and you have an extra fifth screen. So how was your NFL game day?
Well, I started out in the living room to start the game off. I had my good friend Pat was there. The great Bill Berman came over, so we had so we were able to coordinate that. It was a beach day, so thankfully we had the quiet house to ourselves, which was nice. And then the afternoon we took it outside because we needed to make some pizzas to go along with the afternoon game. So it was great. I mean, there's nothing better. I was 4-game Femi. Our previous host Femi, I used to give him shit because I said, "There's no way you can watch 4 games at one time," and you can't watch 4 games at one time, but you can have 4 games on at one time. I had the 4 box. I had the giant Minnesota game, which provided a lot of laughter. Pat, my friend, his son-in-law is a huge Giant fan. The day of the game, he sends a picture to me of Peyton Manning and his jersey that he has in his den downstairs. And as we begin our Super Bowl journey year, I'm like, DeLuca, your journey's to hell. You're not going to a Super Bowl. You're going down. I mean, so that was comedy. And then I had Tennessee, Chicago. That was comedy. And but the main game I was watching was Atlanta, Pittsburgh in the big screen. So it was fun. How about you? How did you have it?
Yeah, well, I'm still in the moving process, but I had the quad box going. I'm a big fan of the quad box, especially on college football days. But I woke up and it was a little nippy here in Nashville. It was 40 degrees when I first woke up. So it was sweater weather. I went down to the local farmers market shop and got some chili. So I was full on sending it to football season, like fall season. It felt good, but you guys made pizzas do you have a little smoker outside or how's that work?
No, we've got an Italian pizza oven that I put outside there that took me a while to get going, but we did that. And and so we had steaks on the grill. It was a good day. It really was. It was a lot of fun. And the games were good. We had Brady's game on in the quad box in the afternoon. I didn't get to hear as much. I thought it was a little uncomfortable. I didn't think the rhythm was there yet. He's got so much information. Like, I think a lot of times when you have so much you want to talk about, you don't really know. And the beats of those games, you got to go quick, and so, but I'm sure he'll get better. And that game was a hard game to do because, as we're going to talk about, Deshaun was hard to watch.
Yeah, I did hear one theory about Tom Brady that he's kind of a cusser. So maybe he was like biting his tongue and that's why there were so many dead pauses. But I mean, he's so good at all these performance-based, things. He's going to get better. But yeah, let's get into that game. The Cowboys crushing the Browns. But the biggest news of the weekend happened just hours before that game with Dak Prescott and the Cowboys finally coming to terms on an extension. It's 4 years, $260 million. He now becomes the highest paid player in NFL history in terms of average per year at 60 mil. What did you make of this contract? First of all, just on a numbers basis, and then the timing of it as well.
Well, I got to see the numbers basis because they tend to be inflated, right? You never know. So I don't know what they did with this year's deal and how it's spread out. But I think, to me, look, Jerry was never worried about free agency. I was surprised they got it done, actually, Grace. I really was. But I knew they were never going to lose them. I don't think Jerry was ever worried about losing them. I think he felt like he would always get them done. And that whole notion, well, you can't franchise me and I could be a free agent. Look, when you put $80 million in front of somebody, they're going to take it, right? Like $80 million, or do I wait? Like, what am I waiting for, right? That's the power of the regular season. So I'm not surprised by that. And I'm not surprised that Dallas played well. One of the picks I told Pat to bet on his DraftKings app was take Dallas in the 2.5, because all the talk about Dallas being uncertain, to me, was more about contracts. It wasn't about their team. Whereas there was so many uncertainties about Cleveland, whether it's could their defense play good again? Where's their offensive line with the 2 starting tackles missing, Conklin going over to left tackle and moving a new player into right tackle? And where were they with Deshaun Watson at quarterback? And I think that sound you heard yesterday at 7:30 when the game ended was all the Cleveland fans saying, when in the hell are we going to get rid of Deshaun Watson? watching, which I got to break some news to you. They can't get rid of Deshaun. They actually, Grace, they redid his contract this year. So they guaranteed his paragraph 5, which was already guaranteed, but they used it as signing bonus. And so now his cap number next year is 72 million with 99 million of acceleration, followed by another 70 million. And I think you watch him play, I watch him play. He doesn't seem like it bothers him that he's playing like shit. It doesn't seem like it bothers him at all.
Yeah. So some of the stats I wanted to pull up are his efficiency on the deep ball, because before he came to Cleveland, that's what he was known for in Houston. He was a top 10 quarterback in throwing passes of 20 or more air yards. But in this game against the Cowboys, he was 0 for 10 on passes of 15 plus air yards, 0 for 4 on passes of 20 plus air yards, pressured on 45% of his dropbacks. He went 3 for 12 when throwing under pressure for just 10 yards. What do you think the problem is?
It's been this way the whole time, Grace, since he came there. The last year that he had, I mean, I don't know if we'll call it the Will Fuller problem, because when he had Will Fuller, he was good, right? And now he hasn't been good. So here's the Browns. The Browns make this decision, and you can blame Andrew Berry, you can blame Dee Podesto, but look, Jimmy Haslam, I worked for the man for 1 year. He was obsessed with quarterbacks. He wanted one. I truly believe this deal doesn't get done in the fashion that it got done unless the owner really wanted to do it. To me, you could fire Barry for the deal. You could fire Dee Podesto. It's going to go down as one of the worst contracts in the history of the NFL. It's going to make the Russell Wilson contract look like, oh, this isn't so bad, but it's going to, because he hasn't gotten any better. And based on what he did in Houston, it has not manifested it here. He hasn't averaged over 6.5 yards per attempt. All those numbers you've cited are perfectly in line with what he's not been able to do. There's no deep ball accuracy. There's no playmaking. The ball's sprayed. I don't think his arm's as strong as it once was. And he looks like a player that's nervous in the pocket and he's looking to escape. I mean, if you're a Browns fan, I've listened to a bunch of comments online from Brown fans, like they want to pull the plug on the guy. I don't know what I don't know what the locker room thinks, right? Like you see this guy making all this money and he can't deliver anything. Like there's going to lose the locker room at some point. And I think, to me, all the Browns Super Bowl hopes are going to be vanished, because look, Joe Flacco was a better quarterback than he was last year. That's not even debatable. That's not even debatable. And they didn't bring him back. So if you want to bench him, do you really want to go with Jameis Winston? I don't think that's a smart play. And they fired what's his face from, now he's at Alex Van Pelt. They fired him and they bring in Dorsey. Like, it wasn't the scheme's fault. When a quarterback gets 1,600 yards in 5 games like Flacco did, and then the other guy only gets 11, are you sure it's the scheme that's fucked up, or you think it's something else? And to me, they're just going to keep chasing their tail, trying to blame the scheme, blame the coaches, as opposed to blaming the real problem, which is Watson.
You bring up Jameis Winston. One thing I will say is, yes, he's a turnover machine, but he can complete the deep ball, and he's a lot more thrilling to watch. So, yeah, I'm not actually making a case for him, but I think it would at least be fun.
They don't have Chubb either, so they can't run the ball. They're one-dimensional. They don't have Nick Chubb. Ford ran the ball, but you can't get from behind. I mean, their defense played like they were on the road, and I thought Dallas was very efficient in the game. CeeDee Lamb looked like he didn't miss a beat, and that young offensive line held up in there. I think that was as good as it gets there for the Cowboys, because they go into Cleveland with Myles Garrett. They know they're going to have a tough time blocking him, but the young line came through. So, look, it was a hell of a win for Dallas. But the two things, here's what drives me crazy. So Kevin Stefanski won Coach of the Year 2 years in a row. I get he's the play caller, but you can never punt the ball down the middle of the field to Turpin. I said on the pod, I would never let Turpin – I would kick the ball out of bounds on Turpin, and I would kick it out of the end zone on kickoff. He's too good. And what do? They kick it down the middle of the field. Like, that to me is a coaching error of the highest magnitude. Like, that is malpractice by coaching, because this is the one player who could destroy your team. And then Aubrey, the kicker. I mean, the guy makes a 66-yarder, and they got delay of the game, which I don't understand it. But to me, these two guys they got for free off the street, and they're two of their best players. So give Dallas credit for that. I mean, and Cleveland to punt the ball down the middle of the field, to that guy and knowing that it could be coming right back at you, I think that's just horrendous. That's bad. That's, as Belichick would say, that's bad ball.
Mm. Yeah, outcoached, outplayed. I do want to ask you a question though. When it comes to getting your money's worth with Deshaun Watson's contract, if you were GM of the Browns now, and I don't know how many executives or maybe the owner would have to get in on this decision because of how much is invested, do you have to see the contract out? Like, I mean, if the Browns are horrendous for the next few years with him, does that affect your bottom line? Like, do you need to get him out and just eat it and get another quarterback in there so you can bring in some
They're going to
revenue?
lose their fan base if they don't. Look, I know those fans are passionate. I mean, they're going to blame somebody in that town for this. And I think what you have to try to do, Grace, is get a young quarterback. I mean, here's what's going to happen. The longer Stefanski puts him out there and he doesn't deliver, he's going to lose his team because the team's going to be divided. Because you got good receivers, you got guys. I mean, you have a team that's ready to compete, assuming they get their offensive line back. But they're going to lose their team, and when you lose your team, it doesn't matter what the cap number is. You got to make the move, and so that's where they're tinkering on. There's no confidence in him being a player. He's played 6 games 2 years ago, 6 games last year, and now he's played this game. 13 games in his Cleveland Brown career has been a disaster. And if I were the GM, I think you got to kind of wait a little longer, give it the month of September. But at some point, what you're seeing, and I'm not watching practice, but I don't see the solution being very good here. I don't see it coming out of the tunnel. I think it's going to be really challenging. I think the light at the end of the tunnel is another train.
Okay, so you said give it to the end of September. So if the Browns go 0-4, you think it's Jameis time?
I think they're going to have to do something or else they're going to lose the team. See, that's what people don't understand is the head coach stands in front of the team. If he's playing a quarterback that sucks, you lose your team. No matter who you are, whether you're Zach Wilson, whether you're Mac Jones last year, you got to be able to sell that we can win the game with this guy at quarterback. And Winston, they believe in Winston. You can just see it in pregame. Now, once the game starts, I'm not sure they do.
Yeah. Jameis, definitely a player's guy, definitely a player favorite. All right, well, Browns weren't the only Ohio team to have a tough loss in week 1. The Bengals with a horrendous upset to the Patriots. We're talking that next.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back into the GM Shuffle presented by Smirnoff. We do game days. Please drink responsibly. The Smirnoff Co., New York, New York. I'm Grace Remington with Michael Lombardi, continuing our recap of the NFL Week 1 games. Next, let's go to the Patriots and the Bengals. This is one no one saw coming. One of the most popular pick in the Circa Survivor pool. A whopping 34% of entries were eliminated, as there were over 14,000 entries and almost 4,900 entries had the Bengals there. They, of course, win as the 7.5 point, or lose as a 7.5 point favorite. Michael, what went wrong in this one for the Bengals?
Look, I blew this one completely because, past performance predicts future achievement, right? And we know that Zach Taylor's horrendous in the first part of the season. We know this. I don't know what he does during training camp. I don't know what they're doing there in Cincinnati, but clearly getting his team prepared for the regular season ain't something that he's working on. And yesterday was just another example of him almost walking through the raindrops. I mean, like, what is he doing? Like, one of the things you have to measure yourself as a coach is it's easy to get your team ready to play Kansas City. It's easy to get your team ready to play, Texas to play Michigan. That's easy. You don't really have to you have to calm them down. You don't have to get them going. The mark of a true leader is, how do I get the team to play at the highest level, chase something different than a win, and chase a standard of excellence, which clearly they don't have in Cincinnati because they're 1-10, I think, against the spread the first 2 games in his career. And I knew all this, and he lured me into the trap thinking, okay, this year is going to be different. I saw them, they were practicing harder. They put their guys in the preseason, but they come out, and here's what bothers me, Grace, and this is where I have a hard time with it, and you're going to learn from having do this with me, is these guys that just look at their play sheet and call plays, they never set up the game to win the game. They set up the game to run plays. They don't set up the game to win the game. You go into this game, you're playing against the Patriots. You know they're going to want to run the ball, they're going to want to play from in front, and they're going to want to limit Jacoby Brissett from throwing it. So what do we have to do? We have to make sure they can't run the ball. That's number one. Number two, we got to play from in front. We got to have a really good script early in the game. We got to script this thing. I got to be on the team to start fast, start fast, start fast. And instead, the opposite happens. They start slow. The Patriots get the lead. They can comfortably play from in front, and then they can run the ball all day. And then never really had to put any pressure on Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. So credit to Gerard Mayo and the staff in New England for doing something that Zach Taylor, who's got the better team. I mean, Zach Taylor, you would think he would have learned from Mitchell Trubisky going in there and beating them and Burrow throwing 5 interceptions on opening day. Like, you would think he would have learned. But, like, at what point do you say to yourself, hey, Zach, maybe you should change your approach? It drives me insane.
Yeah, you're right. They started slow. I mean, this one was out of reach by the end of the first quarter. The Bengals offense generated just 17 yards of offense in their first 2 possessions. Meanwhile, the Patriots had 107 total yards and then scored a touchdown on the first play of the second quarter. You mentioned the Patriots run game too. Obviously, that's where every game plan starts. Patriots, they had 0 explosive. Their longest play was 17 yards. I think that's what people aren't realizing. It was the run game, and that's it. They were averaging 4.7 yards per carry, 39 rushes to 24 passes. They just ran the Bengals into the ground. What happened to the Bengals' run defense?
At home. And the Bengals, I could see it if it was up in New England, but they're playing in front of their home crowd. I mean, and Kenyon White was just tremendous. They couldn't block him. And Burrow, I'm not sure Burrow is healthy. I'm really not. Like, I heard them on the broadcast say that he's got to take a bunch of jump shots to get his wrist to loosen up, that he has a hard time doing it. Like, he did not throw the ball. We had a writer on earlier in the season. They said that I asked him about Burrow's arm, and the guy said, look, it's not quite what it was. He just doesn't have the same zip. It didn't look to me like it was the same arm. But this team, to me, they're soft up front. I mean, that's the best way to describe the Bengals. They're soft. You're not beating it now. I know Taylor says, well, we'll play better when we get the second half of the season. Well, I mean, the North could be over if you don't play good early. You got to go to Kansas City this week. You got to go play Patrick Mahomes on 10 days rest. And you're soft as hell. You couldn't block the Patriots front. To me, if I were Mike Brown, I'd be going crazy, because at what point do you sit there? You know, your father invented coaching, essentially. At what point do you sit there and say, we got to change the way we do business here? We got to change our approach. Now, I know the Chase thing is a distraction. I get that. But the Bengals let that happen. The Bengals being so polite and saying, okay, you can sit in and you can be all this and not practice, when as opposed to, look, you're in your 4th year of your contract. Either you play or go home. I mean, at some point, somebody's going to be the bad guy. You know, if you don't mind being the bad guy and take the media hit, but at some point, somebody's got to walk up to Chase and say, hey, Jamar, either you play or you're gone. Chase comes out and says, oh, I'm not looking for Jefferson's contract. I'm looking for well above Jefferson's contract. Once I heard that, I'm like, send him home. He ain't getting that. That's why we have a market. You're not that much better than Justin Jefferson. You're a good player. It would be like Penny Sewell saying, no, I don't want to get paid as the highest paid tackle. I want to get paid twice as much. I mean, at what point does that happen? So that was frustrating to me. And credit the Patriots. That was the best I've seen the Patriots look all summer. They block people. Doesn't say a lot about the Cincinnati Bengal run defense. They missed DJ Reader, but they look like they didn't execute at practice at all.
Well, can we go back to Jamar Chase for a second? Because he was definitely a little frustrated after the game when local media was asking him about the slow starts. You know, he just kind of shrugged and was like, ask Zach, bruh. But he did lead the team with 6 targets, 6 receptions, wasn't efficient with 62 yards, and then claims he had food poisoning. So are you buying into that? And is he making excuses now that, you know, he's not showing out like he wanted to get this higher contract?
I don't know. I mean, look, you know, if you have food poisoning, you know, that's a hard thing to, you know, usually you're dehydrated, you have propensity to get, you know, pull a hamstring, you're running into the bathroom. I mean, that's a hard thing to overcome. I think, to me, the whole Cincinnati Bengal team had food poisoning. Really, when you look at it, they play like crap. mean, when you don't make a play. Now, look, the Gesicki has the touchdown, and then it's called back, which I think was the right call. And then the next play, they fumble, go through the end zone. But this wasn't just about one or two plays here. This was about a mentality. This was about toughness. This was about mental toughness, which Cincinnati, to me, under Zach Taylor has yet to have, but they seem to think it's okay. I don't know how you keep digging holes for yourself, losing opening games. Like, at what point don't you get your team prepared? And the Chase thing, I think it's going to linger all year. I think the kid's going to be unhappy, and they're not going to make him happy.
Yeah, it could be some awkward situations in Cincinnati, but props to Gerard Mayo on the other side. He joins an exclusive list of head coaches to win their coaching debut as a touchdown underdog. Jason Garrett was the last one to do it in 2010. Pete Carroll and Bill Cowher were the other two. So nice little list for him to join there. Yeah. But let's get on to this Jaguars-Dolphins game. Obviously, the big storyline here was Tyreek Hill being pulled over for reckless driving, speeding before the game. But then the Miami-Dade Police Department detaining him and handcuffing him on the side of the road outside the stadium with fans watching. And then, Michael, I didn't even realize this until today. Calais Campbell, I don't know if you saw this. He went over to help Tyreek. I guess he was driving by. He got handcuffed too when he was trying to help
I didn't know
Tyreek.
that.
So, yeah.
And
So
there's not a
one of
nicer
the,
human being than Calais Campbell. Let me
yeah.
just say that right there. I mean, if he went over there to do it, then, he probably was polite. He probably was off. I mean, this was a mess. I mean, I've never seen somebody get handcuffed for a traffic violation and then thrown on the ground. I mean, when I first saw the clip and he was on the ground, my reaction was, well, what was in his car? Like, what did he
Right.
do that was so, like, to me, and credit to him, he comes out and plays as good as he did. Miami didn't play anywhere near. This was a frustrating game. I mean, this game was, to me, if you're a Jacksonville Jaguar fan, you're my man, Doug Peterson. I don't get him. I really don't. I mean, I don't understand it. He goes for it at the beginning of the third quarter. He's got a 4th and 2, I think, at his own 30-yard line, and he tries to run some crazy play that doesn't give himself a chance. Here's where I think, and I break down every game. I go through every game, and the number one stat that I look at the first part of the games are fourth quarters. What did you do in the fourth quarter? What did your team do in the fourth quarter? So here's Jacksonville's fourth quarter. 1 first down. They had 4 minutes and 53-second time of possession, and they were 0 for 2 on third down. I mean, like, you got to win the game there. Like, at some point, you got to have some. And I don't want to hear this bullshit. Well, we melted in the heat. I don't know. Jacksonville's in Florida too. It's hot as shit in Jacksonville too. Like, don't tell. Yeah, well, that's what they say. Well, they melted in the heat. Give me a break. I mean, give me a break. I mean, you had a chance to win the game. You could have played better than people said. Well, you gave up 400 yards. Wait a minute. They kept him out of the end zone. That you hold Miami to 20 points, you should win the game. And I just think, to me, when you're 2 for 10 on third down like they went 11 drives, 6 without a first down. They had 6 punts in the game, and they had no points in the entire second half. To me, that's coaching. Like, you got to find a way to score in the second half. Like, when you go in at halftime, the first thing you got to think about as a head coach is, okay, what is it going to take to win this game point-wise? Like, we got to get to 35, or we got to get. I mean, you reset your game plan based on that. When you're up at halftime, and I preach about being up at halftime all the time, but when you're up 17-7 at halftime, the first thing you're thinking about is, okay, guys, if we get to 27, we win this game. You're not telling your team that. But again, they just 38. They had 38 rushes and completions in the game, and they had a horrible fumble. It just, to me, was a bad situation. I just felt like, to me, as good as Jacksonville could be, they're just not good enough in terms of the execution on game day.
Yeah, that fumble was a 14-point swing too, because the very next play, Tua to Tyreek Hill for an 80-yard touchdown. But it's just crazy looking at the first half to second half and the Jaguars' efficiency. Trevor Lawrence was 9 for 14 in the first half. In the second half, he only threw it 7 times. They only had one drive longer than 4 plays, and that was the one that ended in a fumble. So I'm not quite sure what's going on in the locker room there at halftime.
Yeah, me either. And I think Ryan Nielsen is really one of the better defense coordinators in the league. I think he did a good job in Atlanta. Atlanta was third in red zone defense, fourth in red zone, and third and third down defense, and they played them good. I thought Jacksonville's tackling though was horrible. Like you could just see watching the games what teams really take preseason serious and what they use contact and all that. So I'm down on. I mean, Jacksonville's got a better team. They deserve better, and that one's on the coach. Going for it on fourth down. I mean, that was a joke. That was a joke. What are we getting out of that, Grace?
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back into the GM Shuffle with Grace Remington and Michael Lombardi. I'll tell you, Michael, the NFL crushed it with the standalone games in week one.
Yeah.
Every single one has been a thriller. The Monday night one hasn't happened yet, but that'll be a good one as well. But let's talk about the Friday night game in Brazil. The Eagles beat the Packers 34-29 in a game that came down to the final possessions. But of course, the big news out of that one is Packers quarterback Jordan Love spraining his MCL. He'll be out 3 to 6 weeks. And now the Packers go to the backup quarterback, Malik Willis. How big is the drop-off between these two?
Oh, it's horrendous. I mean, it's bad. I mean, Malik Willis couldn't even get the Hail Mary pass off. Look, I know you're new to the pod, so I want to introduce you to a character that is really part of the pod. It's my cousin Vince Lombardi, no relation to the original Vince Lombardi, but he's a huge Packer fan. We call him Big Daddy here on the podcast. Big Daddy is outraged because Big Daddy is now convinced that LaFleur, who he calls LaFuck, is wearing makeup before the game because he looked so pristine and so perfect before the game that, his beard was trimmed. LaFleur gets a haircut before every game. Drives Big Daddy crazy. Like, it just drives him. Like, Big Daddy wants a coach that looks like Belichick. Sleeves cut off, no sleep. He wants somebody to do that, right? So, look, I mean, if you're a Packer fan, you love the way that Jordan Love can throw the ball to these great young receivers, but you have to be worried about Jeff Hatley as a defense coordinator in his first game. We knew it could take some time, and now you lose Love. Now, Big Daddy claims the reason they won't have a good backup is they're too cheap. He's been on this program forever. They're not too cheap, but I don't know who in that building thinks Malik Willis can be a starting quarterback. Like, I have no idea what evidence there is to support that. You live in Nashville. Like, they wanted this to be true, and it couldn't be true, right? So I think it's going to be a really hard go for the Packers. I mean, they got to try to convince Ryan Tannehill to come in, but I haven't seen no evidence of that. And to me, Big Daddy is just going to he's given up on the season. He's rooting for, well, we'll probably get a top 10 pick.
Okay, I mean that is something to root for. Does he really want them to start tanking in week 2?
Well, he doesn't think they have any
Jordan Love's
chance.
come back in a few weeks.
He doesn't think they have any chance to go back, and he thinks that with LaFuck, not being able to run the offense, he just feels like it's a mess, and then he's really mad at Jair Alexander. We pay him all that money, he gives up a touchdown because he's been saying he's overrated for anything bad that happens that he's been saying. He'll just say, and if anything good happens, it's always "we'll see." That's his favorite line. We'll see what happens. So he's not happy, and he's not happy. Meanwhile, everybody in Philly's delighted because Barkley scores 3 touchdowns, and John Mara's not happy either because as I posted a picture, I think Elliot, do you have that picture I posted on Twitter the other day? It's so fitting. I mean, John Mara knew this was going to come back to haunt him. And it did. 3 touchdowns. Could you imagine John Mara Friday night sitting at home in his house having to watch Saquon Barkley, knowing that he doesn't have a running back anywhere near as good as that? Well, you could say, well, he didn't want to pay him. Okay. They paid Van Roten $2 million. I mean, they could have found $4 million from some of the stiffs they paid to give the money to Barkley and at least had a good player. But they wanted to protect Daniel Jones more. So they signed Illuminor, Van Roten, and Runyon. I mean, that makes real sense. It really does. Yeah, it does.
I went back and watched some of those Hard Knocks conversation last night. And man, that phone call with GM Joe, I don't know how to say his last name, Joe Shane, where he asked him to test the market and circle back. I mean, how poorly was that handled? I mean, I would be so insulted if I were Barkley. How would have you handled the situation?
Well, it would have never got to that because I would have been
Mhm.
able to tell on the telephone that it wasn't coming back, right? To me,
Yeah.
you don't insult a player like that and say, "Come back with an offer." Make an offer. Make your best
Mhm.
offer that you think. But there was no when you watch that, there was no models. There was no how we building this team. It was really amateur hour. What it did is it insulted my profession. It made people
Mhm.
that can hang out at sports bars think they could be a GM. And so to me, it was really embarrassing. And here's where the big problem is, Grace. And this isn't the first time it's happened. When NFL Films comes into your building and they expose your team, and then your team doesn't play well, and the exposure that you got in there, it doesn't look like you know what you're doing, and then the team plays shitty, things start to crumble in a hurry. I mean, the fans were booing yesterday. They weren't booing because it was a shitty game. I'm sure that's why, but they're booing because they have no confidence. They know that it's no good. And I think that was really significant because I don't think they watched Shane be general manager, and I don't think they had any confidence that he can build a team. Get Singleton. Oh, because you drafted Singleton, you want him on the team. And then, of course, we've got to make it. It's not fair to Daniel Jones. I mean, we've been saying this on the pod for 4 years. Daniel Jones shouldn't be making 40 million. Go to Daniel
Mhm.
Jones and tell him to take a freaking pay cut and give the money to Barkley. Keep some of your good players. And then yesterday, I don't know if you watched much of this game. For all the conversation about, oh, we got the greatest defensive line in all of football, they never got near Darnold. I mean, Dexter Lawrence was a force in the run game and he was dominant, but Burns did absolutely nothing. Thibodeau did nothing. I mean, Sam Darnold looked like the second coming of Joe Montana. All the Jet fans were saying, like, where did that come from? Like, where was that guy? I mean, give credit to Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores. They did a great job. I feel bad for the Giant fans. I really do because I don't see how it gets better. Sure, could they go beat Washington this week? Yeah, no problem. Go beat Washington. But what good team are they going to beat? Like,
Mhm.
what good team? How are they getting the 5 wins, Grace?
I don't know. And you would think with the cameras rolling in your building for Hard Knocks, you'd be on your best behavior. But we
Yeah,
saw in one of those conversations, Giants exec Tim McDonald asked his squad, "What's our identity gonna be?" And we saw that this Sunday. Daniel Jones now 1 for 7 in his last 8 starts. That dates back to 2022. 1 and 7 in his last 8 starts with just 2 touchdowns in that span. The Giants have been outscored by 168 points in those games.
that's why it cracks
So
me up. Giant fans get. That's why it cracks me up. Giant fans get mad at me because I insult. They're 36% win percentage. But look here, I like Brian Daboll. Brian Daboll is a friend of mine. But let me put things in
mm,
perspective. When Brian Daboll was coaching in Miami without a quarterback, when Brian Daboll was coaching in Kansas City without a quarterback, when Brian Daboll was coaching in Cleveland with Eric Mangini without a quarterback, he wasn't getting any offers to become a head coach. Okay. So, like, just like I hate this rhetoric. Well, Brian Daboll is going to make Daniel Jones better. They're going to play better. He can't. It's you can't make a bad player play better. You just can't. You can
mm.
manage it better, but they have no power in their team. They have no powerful back. Oh, they draft neighbors. That's great, but they can't get them the football. And then defensively, they can't cover anybody. I mean, there's just one of the worst secondaries in football. They run Martindale out of there who got turnovers. I mean, even when the game was 3-0, when Minnesota turned the ball over, you could just feel there was no energy. Like, I just don't think the Giants players buy into that they think they're going to win. I just don't think they do. And I'm not saying it's Dayball's fault. I think it's the team's construction's fault. Like, there's no strength on the team that you say, boy, they're going to be a hard out. And I don't want to hear this nonsense. Well, Dayball will make them play better because he's calling the plays. He was calling the plays in Miami when they had shitty quarterbacks. He was calling the play in Kansas City when they had shitty quarterbacks. It don't matter. You can't make
Hmm.
chicken salad out of chicken shit.
Okay, but what about, because I thought this, I mean, there was this big to do about Brian Dable taking over as play caller, and they were talking about downfield passes from the Giants offense all summer long. They didn't
Yeah,
attempt a single pass over 20
right.
yards in the first
Well,
three
that's just
quarters.
Daniel Jones. I mean, he doesn't ever do it. Like he
Mhm.
never averaged over 7 yards. His eye level's down. So there's in football, your eye level determines what you do. When you're worried about the rush and you're looking, your eye level's down. You throw checkdowns, checkdowns, checkdown. That's all he does. He's check down Charlie. But that's the way he's been his whole life, and they've convinced themselves they can win with them. And look, they go from Ben McAdoo, they go to Pat Shermer to Joe Judge and now Brian Daboll. Like at some point, one of the Giants going to say to themselves, look, maybe we should get a professional in here to run the whole operation. Instead of trying to mix and match this, maybe we need somebody. Give Tim McDonald credit. At least he said, hey, we have no identity. They don't. They're horrible. They're going to keep being horrible. There's no way that's a playoff team. And, what did John Maris say at the beginning? They know what my expectations are. Yeah, I mean, were you going to be picking in the top 5? You might have the first pick of the draft if Carolina wasn't so shitty.
Oh, man. Well, on the other side, too, are you a little bit more of a believer in Sam Darnold at this point? I mean, it's the best team he's ever been on. Do you think it's more
Right.
indicative of Darnold's ability, or is it Kevin O'Donnell's coaching ability?
I think a little bit of this goes back to the Bill Walsh line that he told me. There are very few people can coach the quarterback, and even fewer can evaluate him. And I think Kevin can coach the quarterback. And I think they have an identity. They got Aaron Jones in there. Their offensive line is very good.
Mhm.
They didn't have T.J. Hockenson. They lost Addison during the game, but they know who they are. And I think he's a really good play caller. I think he's got a good rhythm to him. And look, Darnold's going to make his mistakes. The one interception he threw was on a tip ball. But I mean,
Mhm.
when you give up a 99-yard play drive with a defensive line that's supposed to be the most dominant defensive line in all of football, you paid all this money to Brian Burns and gave up a second-round pick. Something's going on. Now, look, next week against Washington's shitty offensive line, I'm sure they'll play good. But to me, I think the Giants are just, until they decide enough is enough, right? We're either fixed like they did in 1979 when they hired George Young and they changed the organization. When is enough enough? And the Giant fans are suffering. I mean, they're just suffering because they know the outcome of the season already.
I'll mention this just because you mentioned the Sam Darnold interception. Before his arm was hit on that pass, he had a passer rating of 142, which would have been a career high for him.
Wow.
So 19 of 24 passes for 208 yards and two touchdowns. He had a pinpoint, beautiful 44-yard pass to Justin Jefferson. I think the ghosts are gone, and now they're taking over Daniel Jones and his career.
Yeah.
But
Well, Daniel Jones
looking
I
at,
mean, he can't
go
even
ahead.
make a play. I mean, the guy, and I think he's going to get hurt because they're trying to run him now too, because you have to run him. It's not going to last.
Mhm.
We'll be seeing Tommy Cutlets before too long.
Hey, at least that would be entertaining for the fans. They can go back to the
Yeah.
Italian obsessions and all that stuff. All right, we're
No
going to take
question.
a quick break. Yeah, we're going to take a quick break here. But on the other side, getting into a few more NFL Week 1 games and Michael Lombardi's awards for Week 1. Don't want to miss those. You're listening to the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN.
Welcome back into the GM Shuffle. I'm Grace Remington with Michael Lombardi, and we are going to do a little rapid fire here with some of the other NFL Week 1 results, starting with that Thursday night game. What a way to start the season, Michael.
Yeah.
But the Ravens now fall to 1-4 against the Chiefs in the Lamar Jackson era. We got to see Derrick Henry in his new uniform. And then, of course, on the other side, the Chiefs have an explosive playmaker now in Xavier Worthy. Just amazing.
Yeah.
What were your takeaways from that game?
They scored 27 points in just 50 plays. I mean, they only had the ball for 26 minutes. I think Zach Orr's defense was behind the 8 count. I think one thing that we'll talk about in length this year is the fact that, Baltimore can't play from behind. They need to play from in front. Now, they had a chance to tie the game up. Probably John Harbaugh would have gone for 2, but I thought the Chiefs' offense is more explosive, even with the rookie left tackle. Defensively, they're just as good, maybe not quite as good, but the offense is better. For Baltimore, that offensive line's a work in progress. I think that's a concern. I think Henry has to be in either the pistol or the deep eye. He's not an offset back runner. I don't know why they're trying to make him do that, because if you sign him, you got to put him in the right spot. And Lamar's a play action pass. I mean, that's what they do. They play action pass. There's no explosiveness, I thought, on Baltimore's team. So, but one thing about Baltimore, they'll improve. They got the Raiders at home this week, and they'll get better. And I'm sure they'll take advantage of the extra rest and the extra practice time that they probably had. But I thought Kansas City looked like the best team on the field that day. And even the game, as close as it was, I don't think it was as close as it was when you look at the box score.
Yeah, that's true. Texans beat the Colts 29-27. Anthony Richardson definitely showed some reason to be excited about him in the future, but the Colts defense, the real problem here, as they lost their season opener for the 11th straight year.
I mean, I preach to the choir here, Grace. You're going to hear me bitch about Gus Bradley and his vanilla defense forever. And it's the Colts, it's their own fault, right? When you know something is bad and you continue to allow it. Shane Steichen and Gus Bradley are best friends, and they're letting their friendship get in the way. That you cannot run a generic scheme like they run in Indianapolis and think it's going to be all okay. Look, Gus Bradley, I'm sure, is a wonderful human being. I know he is. He's a great guy, but his schemes are outdated. Everybody can do it. Everybody understands how to attack them, and it's going to hold back. It's going to cost people jobs in Indianapolis because they're not good enough on defense. I think Shane Steichen's an outstanding play caller, outstanding play designer. Richardson can throw the ball down the field. He made some incredible throws. He's got the ability to run with it, but they can't stop anybody. They can't get the ball back when they need to get the ball back. So, look, I was on Russo on Friday, and I took the Colts in 3. And I hated the pick because I hate watching Indianapolis because it drives me crazy to watch them and play defense. They're so vanilla. They give up so many easy plays. They make it easy for the offense. They never do anything to challenge the offense. And it's hard to root for them. And look, Chris Ballard, the general manager, and Jim Irsay, they all love Gus Bradley. But loving somebody and costing you your jobs, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, one alarming stat from that game I found was at one point, Houston's Joe Mixon was averaging more than 4 yards before contact per rush.
Wow. Yeah.
I know. It's embarrassing.
You're playing at home. You're playing at home with crowd noise, with a great crowd. You should be able to play run defense. But see, he's running Pete Carroll's old scheme that's outdated. But as somebody in the building's got to stop it. But you're either coaching it or allowing it to happen. And the Colts front office is allowing it to happen.
Real quick, I want to get your thoughts on Anthony Richardson because I know you weren't too high on him to start the season, but 3 passes of 50-plus air yards, only the 5th quarterback ever to have multiple completions of that. So the threat of the deep ball is now back for the Colts. What do you like about that?
One throw, he outgains Daniel Jones 40 throws. So, I mean, it's remarkable, right? So, look, I loved Anthony Richardson when I first saw him play against at Florida. But then I was concerned about his inexperience. But I think Steichen's a really good coach. And I think you're just going to have to live with some overthrows. I mean, they had a chance for a couple big plays that they missed in the game because he had some overthrows. But it's part of the deal. But you're not going to win. Anthony Richardson's not going to carry the team without a good defense. And right now, their defense, their secondary is atrocious. They play a simple coverage. They make it too easy for the quarterback. And when you make it too easy for a good quarterback like C.J. Stroud, you deserve to get your ass beat.
All right, moving along to the Sunday night game. This one going to overtime, a playoff rematch where the Lions beat the Rams 26-20. What did you like in this one?
Well, I think Sean McVay deserves an award for being able – first of all, he starts the game off without Haverstein and his 2 starting tackles. Then he loses his backup tackle, Noteboom, and he's got to put somebody in there who's not qualified to play left tackle. In college and in the left – it wasn't fair to that kid, but he had to go in there and play because they're down linemen. So now, for them to play as well as they did, to have the game get to overtime – is really remarkable considering. But I thought their conditioning wore them down. I think, to me, when you don't play your guys in the preseason, I think what happens to you, you lose conditioning. Your team gets tired. Maybe that's what happened to Jacksonville in the second half. I don't know. But you got to play guys. You got to have to do that. I think Sean was incredible with his design and how he handled it. I thought Stafford was incredibly tough. But I will say this about Detroit. If Detroit just decides to run the ball, they can run it on anybody. They can run it on anybody with that line. And to give them credit, they did.
Okay, 3 rookie quarterbacks made their debut in week
Oh,
1.
yeah.
Only one of them won. It was Caleb Williams becoming the first number 1 overall pick to win his NFL debut since David
He,
Carr in
he,
2002. But he does not deserve the credit for that.
he didn't win anything. Well, who should get the game
No.
ball is Will Levis. Look, here's what I'll say about Will Levis.
Whew.
Okay, you just lost one of the best coaches in football, Mike Vrabel, because Rand Carthon was convinced Will Levis is going to be the guy. Okay, so Rand Carthon won the power struggle in your hometown there of Nashville. And they built everything this off. Brian Callahan got the job because of Will Levis. Every move they made this offseason is to make Will Levis better. And I'm telling you, I will be completely shocked. I'll give it more time. But Will Levis is a robot playing quarterback. Look, he couldn't beat out Sean Clifford. He was horrendous in this game. Fumbled, the ball sprayed all over. He's got guys wide open. He can't get them the football. Look, that was the best thing going for Chicago was Will Levis. And to me, all this nonsense about Caleb Williams had a great summer. Belichick and I broke it down on the tape. I mean, it was a joke. I mean, he threw 20 passes. He's running around the pocket, the offensive line. They're a Madden team, the Bears. They're a Madden team with no offensive linemen and no toughness. They have no toughness on offense. They're never going to put their feet in the ground and punch you in the mouth. I'm just telling you, I think Caleb Williams will get better. It was a bad start, but this Bear offense has got no toughness. They're never going to be able to out-tough somebody. Bo Nix, I thought, was really inconsistent. I think when you go through it all, they played like rookie quarterbacks. I mean, that's what they did. They played. Jaden Daniels is trying to make plays, but that's what we expected. Everybody thought Caleb Williams was going to just take over. I mean, come on, give me a break. But they can't really run the ball. They have nickel runners. I mean, Ryan Poles has built a team that's basically good for Madden, but it ain't good for Chicago when the weather gets bad.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely looked like a rookie adjusting to bigger, faster, smarter opponents, but it wasn't all on him. Not enough run support. Bears had 84 rush yards in the entire game. That's 3.8 yards per attempt. Let's get into your.
They're not going to be able to run it, Grace. Where are we going to the awards here?
Yeah, let's do it. So your fraud of the week.
Oh, that's easy. Those Falcons. I mean, we're the Super Bowl champion Falcons. Oh my God, they're going to the Super Bowl. I loved every minute of it. I mean, they got so lucky in the game. First of all, they couldn't block TJ Watt. The biggest mistake, I don't give a shit what Pro Football Focus says, the Falcons' offensive line sucks. They can't pass protect. They just can't pass protect. It's a play action pass line. McCrary, the right tackle, got his ass kicked. I loved it when they brought Kyle Pitts over like he was going to help out and chip. Meanwhile, TJ Watt threw him like 15 yards, like a shot put. And then this offense that's supposed to be so explosive because Super Bowl winning GM Terry Fontenot picked all these great skill players. They couldn't move the ball at all. And Cousins was horrendous. He was bad. Now, it was his first game back, but to me, they're the fraud of the week. If you think that's a team that can win a Super Bowl, how about this? If you're so good, if you're this greatest defense, at the end of the half with like 28 seconds to go, at the end of the half, the Pittsburgh Steelers move it right down the field, get in field goal range. George Pickens catches a deep pass right down the field. A.J. Terrell, they made him the second highest paid corner. He couldn't cover Pickens in the game, could not cover him in the game. To me, they're a joke. They can blame Arthur Smith for all their problems. That's a joke. They're the fraud of the week.
Yeah, let's add their fan base to the fraud of the week, too. There were so many Steelers fans in Mercedes-Benz. The Falcons had to switch to a silent count. Yeah, TJ Watt's out there telling them to rise. I mean, just not the scene you want to do. Okay, how about your Fred Palermo best game plan?
Give it to the Patriots. I mean, they deserved it. Great job. They stayed the course. They didn't try to do something they can't do. I thought they were great.
Mm-hmm. How about on the lamb?
I think it's the whole Giants. I mean, look, at some point you're going to have to realize you're 36% since Tom Coughlin left. Your quarterback stinks. Some of the decisions that are going on in that building have to change at some point. And do you think it's going to turn around? I don't.
All right. And if you don't know, now you know.
The Panthers still stink. I mean, I hate to say it, but I mean, look, Dave Canales is a good guy. I get all that. But the reality of it is he didn't even play. Bryce Young played like I've seen enough out of Bryce Young. Like, I've seen enough that Bryce Young might be a bust. That's how much I've seen. Their defense is atrocious. I mean, it's horrible. Like, this is about as poorly run as a franchise as you're ever going to get. And I never thought it could get worse than it did last year. I thought it would improve. but it sure as hell doesn't look like it's improved. I mean, they can't rush the passer. They can't cover. Bryce Young looks like a blown pick. I mean, when Derek Carr's dominating the game in the first quarter, and he's like, I mean, he truly was Ricky Fowler. He shot 62 on the Thursday of the Masters. There's no question. He killed them. They're terrible.
I know. I was going to say, I feel a little bit bad for Bryce Young because he started out with an interception, and then the Saints had that 59-yard touchdown pass on the opening drive. So right off the bat, he's playing from behind.
Yeah.
And with the talent around, I mean, what are you going to do? I don't know. It's just not a good situation.
I mean, Dan Morgan will figure it out. Yeah, right. Dan Morgan's going to figure it out. I mean, he was there when they were shitty, and they promoted him.
Do you believe in Dave Canales, though?
I have a hard time believing this one. I think he's too young for this. Job's going to be a tough one for him.
Yeah, especially with his size. All right. Well, that was our NFL Week 1 recap. We will be back here on Thursday previewing Week 2 games. I'm Grace Remington with Michael Lombardi. This is the GM Shuffle. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.